This Friday in the U.S., the movie I Am Vengeance Retaliation will come out. You can see it on digital platforms and on DVD. This is the sequel to the 2018 hit that stars the man that joins me now on the Vaqueros Cafe and Cantina hotline. He has given bad news. He's given some good news. He's been a leader. He's been a champion. And now he is just a badass. He is Stu Bennett joining me now. Stu, how are you, man?
I'm fantastic, Stu. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining me. Let's talk for a second. This is the second of these films in which you play a former Special Forces soldier. You know, this is one of these badass kind of the 80s, blow everything up and let's fight everybody. Talk for a second about how proud you are of this sequel.
Yeah, I'm thrilled with the sequel. It's an unabashed ode to 80s action movies, which really, as a child of the 80s, were the first grown-up movies that I ever watched. The likes of Stallone and Schwarzenegger and the kind of films they were making back then. And that was my first experience of what an adult film is about. Watching them at a friend's house or something like that, when they stole them from their parents' video cabinet or whatever it was. But yeah, I'm a massive fan of that genre, and it's great for me, coming from the background I come from, to be able to produce and star in a film that is basically on that same track.
And this is, again, you become a really good action hero type actor. A lot of action movies. I look at the cast on this movie, and the entire cast looks like a bunch of people that I really don't want to mess with in a dark alley. Was that kind of the framing of this? Is get people that look like they could just beat the snot out of you at any given moment?
Well, coming from a wrestling background, I'm all too aware of how important appearance and look is in convincing an audience of your credibility, sometimes even more so than actual wrestling talent. But certainly in this film, we've got some really fantastic-looking rogues in the film. We have a team of bad guys, and I'm leader of the team of good guys, but the leader of the bad guys is Vinnie Jones, who himself has one of the greatest villain faces, I think, in the history of modern cinema. And he surrounded himself with some real tough cookies too. So it's important. It's a vitally important part of acting and film to portray and visually show the characters that you're portraying. And I think the casting department did a fantastic job of picking the ones for this film.
I agree. I mean, even the women that are on this cast, while they look fantastic, still look like they could beat me up at any time. You mentioned Vinnie Jones. I know how excited you are to work with Vinnie Jones. Just talk about your admiration of him and what he's done in what you call football, what we call soccer, but in that universe, and now transitioning into acting.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Vinny since I was a little kid. I remember watching him win the FA Cup in the UK, which is the soccer equivalent of the Super Bowl. I watched him when I was 7 years old, and he was playing for a team of a ragtag bunch of misfits, basically, who went on and took on Liverpool, and Liverpool were the best team in the world. Somehow Vinnie Jones and his band of merry men ended up winning the FA Cup that year, and so I've known of Vinny pretty much my entire life, and I've always been a fan of him, and watching films like Lock, Stock and Snatch as I got older, and being huge fans of those two. He's had two brilliant careers, and almost in parallel to what I'm trying to do at the moment, certainly in the film world. He transitioned from one discipline, i.e. soccer, where he had a tremendous amount of success, into another and continued his level of success. So he really is a model of the kind of things that guys who are transitioning into other realms can kind of follow. And even before The Rock did the crazy stuff that he's been able to do, Vinnie Jones kind of set that model, in my mind anyway, of how to transition. So yeah, big fan of both his film and his football playing, and a huge thrill for me to get to work with him.
Let me ask you this, Stu, because, of course, familiar with your work in WWE and everything, and of course now you're in the commentating booth with Joe Galli in NWA, but when you started getting into the acting more, was there a challenge in transitioning from the wrestling world to acting that surprised you, I guess, is the best way to put it?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very lucky when I was with WWE that I got a couple of acting roles through WWE Studios. The first one being a film called Dead Man Down, which I have a very, very minor part in. And that was kind of 8 weeks of filming for me, but I barely did anything. So I was in the background of a lot of scenes. But it was a great, great opportunity to dip my toe in the water and experience what it was like working with the likes of Colin Farrell and Terrence Howard and all these top actors and top directors and things like that. The second film I did was one called Eliminators, which was a much smaller budget, but I ended up being a much bigger character in the film. I was the lead villain. So that was the first time I really got experience of what it's like to be an actor and have a bunch of lines and have a bunch of scenes that I've got to carry. And that the biggest shock to me coming into it, I had to do a lot of fight scenes in the film, was just how different fight scenes in film are compared to fight scenes in professional wrestling. Whereas fight scenes in professional wrestling, we are connecting with all our shots. We are picking each other up and throwing each other around. And you're very much improving and ad-libbing and working with each other with a vague idea of where you're going. Whereas the specifics of fight scenes in film are exact and precise. And you have to throw a punch at this exact angle, at this exact speed, at this exact height, this exact distance from this person's face. And if we don't get that, then we're going to stop and we're going to shoot that one punch again, and we'll do it 20 times until we get the right one. So it was a lot of getting used to, and I think the hardest part was not only memorizing exactly and precisely where to throw each punch and kick and where to put my feet and all that stuff, kind of like a dance, but also maintaining a level of adrenaline and aggression, despite the fact that you might be throwing this punch for the 20th time in a row. Whereas in pro wrestling, obviously that adrenaline and aggression is constantly there, in part because you're doing it once and in part because you've got 10,000 screaming fans around you too.
Yeah, that's true. That does make a little bit of a difference. We're talking with Stu Bennett. Follow him on Twitter at Stu Bennett. Let me ask you this, Stu. Is there a dream role that you have in mind for your acting career? Is there a genre of movie that you want to try next?
I'm very open-minded, and I think I have to be by virtue of the fact that I've got a rather unorthodox background when it comes to the acting world. Any offers that come in, we look at them. What's the role? Is this something I can portray, first of all? I think there's an element of me inevitably being typecast as a big, scary guy, either in a good guy role or a bad guy role. I've done 5 films now. I've had guns in every single one of them. I've had fight scenes in every single one of them. So there's an element of that I will be naturally limited to the kind of things that are going to come my way. If I could pick anything out there in the world of film, I would love to be involved in a Western, a modern day kind of Western, like, play the kind of Dirty Harry kind of roles, even as a villain, and, stuff like 310 to Yuma and all these great modern Westerns that have come out. I think if I could do something like that, it would need a lot of work on the accent, and I can't ride a horse either. But I'd be prepared to put in work, certainly, to be involved in that kind of production.
Okay. I could see you. I could definitely see you in a Western, wearing the hat and the boots and everything. Something that I learned in doing some research with all the different weapons that you use in this movie, as well as the first one, you haven't prior to this, you didn't have a lot of experience with weapons. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I'm an Englishman. Guns are not really allowed out there. I know in American culture they're very popular, of course. But in the UK, we do have a slightly different view on guns. Mm-hmm. So I didn't grow up with guns. I think the first gun I ever held was in the first film I did, Dead Man Down, and I've held guns in every single one since. So that takes a bit of getting used to. Initially, there's a bit of guns, certainly when you've only ever seen them on crime TV shows or something like that. So you need some training about safety, of course, but also how to realistically hold them. And how to, in different scenarios, hand-to-hand combat, how close you would hold the gun to yourself, how would you walk with the gun. And then on top of that, there's an extra level when you're in a film like I Am Vengeance, because not only am I holding a gun, I'm now holding a gun as a special forces soldier who, again, would hold it differently to a guy in the street or a bank robber or whatever it would be. So there's definitely a lot of training that goes into it. Fortunately, we have some great armourers on the set of I Am Vengeance who are actual ex-Special Forces guys themselves. They are the best when it comes to training me exactly how, no, in this scene, because you're hiding behind a barrel or a crate, you need to hold it with your shoulder a little lower, do this, don't pop your head out, all this kind of stuff. So it was great to have those people to bounce ideas from.
Yeah, having served alongside Special Forces at a time or two in my Army career, it was, you're right, good guys to learn from, and luckily they were good friends as well. I want to transition a bit, because it was recently was the 10th anniversary of your debut on Monday Night Raw with the Nexus. Was there something about the Nexus that, I guess, your biggest regret of it? Was there something that you felt like they missed the mark on?
It's very difficult for me to have regrets from that period because I did get a lot of benefit from it. Undoubtedly, I think anyone who witnessed it realizes that it could and should perhaps have been much bigger than it was. But ultimately, I wasn't involved in the decision-making process. I certainly wasn't politically savvy enough at that point in my career when I was a very fresh-faced youngster, kind of blown away with the opportunities he was getting. I wasn't politically knowledgeable or savvy enough to go in and fight my case like I would be able to now, for example. So certain decisions when they were made back then, if the Stu Bennett from 2020 was transported back in time, would at least have had a better shot of pleading his case and understanding how the game worked a little better. But I can't be too negative. I got a lot out of it. I wish it had gone differently, of course, like a lot of fans do. But to have regrets about it is very difficult for me because I don't believe it was my mistake or my choices that led to the decline of that.
It was definitely a very memorable night that night when y'all came out and attacked John Cena and then pretty much tore up the entire ringside area, and that's so yeah, it's kind of hard to, I guess, like you said, kind of hard to have a regret on something so memorable like that is such a time in history. Let me ask you this: you
absolutely. Somebody told me somebody tweeted me when I tweeted about it that it took the worst Raw of the year and turned it into the best Raw of the decade. Was that one moment? And whether or not people agree with that is one thing, but I do agree that it was such an iconic moment. And to have been the figurehead and to have been in that, I think the vast majority of professional wrestlers will never have as iconic a moment as that, as we had as a bunch of young guys coming in. So there's definitely a lot of positives and a lot of things we can look back and say, okay, it didn't turn out how we wanted, but we'll always have this, stake placed in history that we did that and we were part of that.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's things like that seem to make those moments. It's those where things are just, it's for whatever reason, one thing just turns it around so quickly. So I get you there. Let me ask this: how much you enjoying working with Joe Galli? Because we know Joe; he's right down the road in San Antonio. Works in news at TV station down there, and very familiar with Joe. How much fun is it to work with Joe on NWA Powerrr?
I love working with Joe. So I came in at the end of or the beginning of season 2 when there was a change on the commentary desk, and I think a lot of people were worried that I would not fit into the shoes that I was trying to fill, so to speak. Obviously, Jim Cornette was there before me, and Jim is brilliant at commentary. He has a tremendous, unmatched perspective in terms of his knowledge of the professional wrestling world. But in terms of my confidence going into that role, I knew I wasn't trying to recreate what Jim was doing because nobody can. I was going to be my own person. I was very confident about my own abilities. So from my perspective, the only question mark I had was the person I was going to be commentating with. And when I'd listened to all of the first season and heard how good Joe Galli was, I had no fear or no nerves whatsoever, despite the fact that many people thought I perhaps should. I knew that I wasn't going to mess it up, and I heard how good Joe was, and I knew he wasn't going to mess it up. So unless I met him that day and he was an asshole, or I was an asshole to him, I think we were going to click, and we did instantly, and I think we'll continue getting better. So I love working with him. He's very talented. Obviously, he's a professional broadcaster in his day job with the news and all that stuff, and he has a great ability. No matter where I'm taking him as the color commentator, he has a fantastic ability to navigate us back on track, which for me as the color guy gives me a lot of freedom and confidence knowing that I can go all around the houses with this. I can take this wherever I want because he's a solid enough anchor and smart enough to be able to navigate us back on track and back to where we need to go. So, I love working with him. He's a great guy and somebody I hope to be working with a lot longer in the future too.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, you guys make a great team, and you sound great on NWA Powerrr. I've enjoyed every episode that you've been on. It is a different voice, and that's good. Let me ask you this: you look at the NWA, of course. Right now, things are kind of shut down, but when things get rolling back up, Nick Aldis is still the world champion. Has held that title for a long time after he took it from Tim Storm, who's a good friend of mine. Who do you see as a viable challenger coming up? Is there someone that you've got your eye on that could really present a challenge to Nick Aldis and take that 10 pounds gold away from him?
Well, up until the pandemic, we were very close to a match between Nick Aldis and Marty Scurll from Ring of Honor. And those two have known each other a long time, and that was where that was going. Whether that is reborn when we get back up and running again, I don't know. I'm not involved in the decision making. I don't know what contractually has been agreed between those parties, but I will say there is an individual in NWA who I think has kind of been in the shadows a little for a long time, and I think in terms of his ability in the ring, his physique, his intensity, and his experience level at this point, I think one day he's going to be a big threat to Nick Aldis or whoever is the NWA World Champion, and that is Tom Latimer, another English guy. And I've known Tom for about 15 years. I think he's fantastic, and I don't think he's ever had that single spotlight really placed on him. The issue at the moment, of course, is he is part of Nick Aldis' faction. He is part of Strictly Business, and those two are very tight, and he plays the very good foot soldier for Nick at the moment. But as we know, in the history of professional wrestling, alliances are often quite loose, and things could change in a heartbeat. So if I was Nick Aldis, I'd keep Tom Latimer on a very tight rein because he's a big threat.
Okay. Good to know. I enjoy Tom Latimer's work all the way back from his days in TNA to what he's doing now with the NWA. So you're absolutely right. Before I let you go, Stu, I got to ask: is there ever a chance that you may dust the boots off and climb back in the ring?
Completely. I've always said I'm not retired from in ring. I'm on a hiatus. I don't think I'll ever go back full time like I used to. Partly because my body wouldn't be able to put up with it now. I'm almost 40 years old, but when I left WWE, I had a huge clear out where most of the memorabilia and items I collected over the years, like there was the old pay-per-view chairs that had my face on it for one Survivor Series. I threw them all away, threw posters away, threw almost everything out, but the one thing I kept were my boots. So they're there, they're ready to go. I might need to get a couple of new pairs of trunks made, but I'm never too far away from perhaps returning if the circumstances are right, the situation is right, and the conditions, the location, and all that stuff. It's the right deal at the right time, and I think I will be back in the ring somewhere at some place at some time.
Well, I'll be tuned in when that happens. So, but until then, he is Stu Bennett. Catch him on I Am Vengeance Retaliation. Comes out this Friday on digital platforms and DVD here in the U.S. Follow him on Twitter at Stu Bennett. Stu, thank you so much for your time. It's great talking to you. I've enjoyed your work throughout the years. Looking forward to see what's coming. By the way, how's your family? How's everybody doing during this crazy time?
Yeah, everybody's great. I'm in a very small family unit here in Los Angeles where I live, and we've all been very careful, and fortunate enough we're in a position where we can pretty much lock down and stay safe and still maintain our bill paying and all that stuff. So we're very fortunate there. My parents at home are doing fine. They're up there in years, of course, so they're in the danger group, but they're being very careful. My brother is helping them take care of things too, so he lives close to them, fortunately. So yeah, I've been very lucky that no one directly close to me has been affected, and I hope that stays the same way. And I hope eventually we all get through this together, and there's no secondary spike, and pretty soon they can come up with some sort of treatment or inoculation or whatever it is. And yeah, we're I hope seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, but let's not get too crazy and get out there and start doing anything too wild yet.
Well, again, I'm glad to hear that. All the best to you. All the best to your family and everything that's going on with you. Looking forward to seeing great success with this movie, and hopefully soon we'll see you back on NWA. But until then, all the best to you. Stay safe, and we'll talk again soon.
Stu, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and good luck with everything, and hopefully we can speak again soon.